Join us for a CHSN watch party at 𝗻𝗁cie Southland Sports Bar. Meet Blackhawks legend Denis Savard, win valuable prizes including a customized engraved hat. CHSN watch party on April 10th at 6 o'clock to watch the Blackhawks take on the Boston Bruins.
Welcome to the Blackhawks Breakaway Podcast for CHSN. We are presented by Toyota. Toyota has more all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive vehicles than any other brand. Find yours and shine on. Toyota, let's go places. With Charlie Roumeliotis, I am Pat Boyle. Late one at the United Center Wednesday night. Blackhawks fall 3-2 via the shootout. They let a 2-0 third period lead slip away. They now have dropped 11 of 12. How you holding up sleep-wise?
I'm holding up okay. I let out my first yawn in the second period, Pat, but we're powering through today. Thankfully, there was no practice, so we got to sleep in a little bit.
Get a little extra caffeine in you.
Yeah.
Let's start with the ending of the Wednesday night game. 18 seconds to go. Hawks protecting a 2-1 lead. Defensive zone draw. And Connor Bedard takes it against Brock Nelson. I was really surprised by this. We know, Connor struggles at the dot. Yes, he's improved as of late, but, Donato was on the ice. He had won last night 67% of his draws. I know it was right side, what have you, but when the game is on the line, were you surprised that they didn't go with, say, Donato taking that draw over Bedard, or even gone a different route with a different line?
This, it felt like a situation to me, like I think we've seen over the last few months, the Blackhawks give Connor Bedard more defensive responsibility, whether that's matching him up against Nathan MacKinnon's line at home, going up against Austin Matthews' line against Toronto, things like that, where typically if you wanted to play the matchups to win the hockey game, you would try to get Connor away from those big lines. And so I'm wondering if it was a scenario where the Blackhawks were just trying to give Connor some of this responsibility and lay the groundwork for some of the deeper routes down the road versus like trying to win that hockey game in the immediate moment. And I remember 𝗻𝗁cie 𝗁𝗶𝗃 when he was the head coach for the Blackhawks, where he would throw out some of his younger guys on defensive zone situations because he's like, I want these guys to be in those situations so that way when the games do matter down the road, they're well equipped for those situations if they have to step into them. So I didn't read as much into it as maybe some others did because I felt like it was what if Connor turned around and was like, I want this face-off? And Andrews was like, okay, go for it. So I think I'm not sure exactly what went into the context of it all, but I don't have a problem with it that he was out there because it felt like it was laying the groundwork for something down the road.
Yeah, if that is the reason for it, I guess I can buy it. I think there's time and place for everything. It's like, okay, is it a teaching moment for him to go up against somebody in Brock who's had a lot of success at the dot in a protecting a 1-goal lead, game on the line scenario, and win, lose, or draw? That is a teaching moment. Or are we, like we've said, time and time again, or heard at least, we want to see some results. We want to see some winning. Winning, also helps culture as well. So I guess it's what is the philosophy of the team? I am with you. I think that there's been a concerted effort to put him out there and see how he handles tough defensive assignments. I just didn't know if you're truly trying to win the game last night, where's the more value? Winning the game, putting a face-off person who's had more success at the dot, not only for the season, but in that given night? Or is it better to put your best player in a position where they can sink or swim and learn, a lesson the hard way? I guess, Anders was asked about it directly, and he went more to the, right side, right-handed shot. Like, he just went more of the setup of the draw and where it was on the ice versus, we're trying to put Connor in difficult situations to see how he handles it.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. And I think the flip side of that is, if he were healthy, that's Jason Dickinson's face-off to take, right? Because he's the guy that takes the defensive zone draws. But because he's not in the lineup because of the injury, out for the rest of the season with a wrist injury, they don't really have that one true center that can go out there and win a defensive draw. I mean, Donato has been pretty decent in that face-off department, but it's not like it's a, when the Hawks were winning Stanley Cups, it was Taves. It was Johnny Taves, or it was Marcus Kruger, it was those guys where you knew that you needed to win a draw. They had those players. With Chicago, they don't really have that slam dunk outside of Jason Dickinson, but he's not in the lineup, obviously.
All right, so special teams played a big role in last night's game. The Blackhawks PK was stellar, 4 for 4 against a highly explosive offensive unit in Colorado, including a shorthanded goal. We always talk about the speed of 𝗍𝗏 and Mikheyev. It is apparent that their speed is a legitimate threat on that penalty kill. And Mikheyev, he's had now 3 shorties on the season to prove it.
It's been unbelievable. It's seemingly every game at this point that they're each getting shorthanded opportunities. We even saw kind of like a half breakaway by 𝗍𝗏 in the game. I think it was in the second period where he kind of sailed one over to the left side of the net. But it's been impressive to watch them, to the point where the more chances they get, the more they're going to start to bury them. And even when I saw that 2-on-1 developing, I was like, both of these guys could really use this goal, because 𝗍𝗏 has been snake bitten with the breakaways. And also, Mikheyev has had so many breakaway opportunities as well. And I thought Mikheyev might try to slide it over to 𝗍𝗏 because he was so snake bitten, but I appreciated that Mikheyev drove that hard to the net, kind of sold that he was going to go to his forehand, went back on his backhand and popped it over. So it was a pretty goal. 18 now on the season, 3 away from his career high, matched his career high in point total last night. So his terrific season continues for the Blackhawks.
He's one of those guys that he's not in the prospect category, but he's a guy that has found his hockey home for at least another season here. And one that you can seemingly put him out there in a lot of different situations and feel very comfortable about it. So a tip of the cap to Mikheyev and that PK unit. And Spencer Knight was great. He was back to the Spencer Knight we saw in the first 4 starts with the Blackhawks. Meanwhile, the power play struggles. They go 0 for 3 on the man advantage. They struggle with breakouts again. Part of this is understandable, with a lot of new faces on these power play units, not a ton of practice time to work out some things, although they did work on breakouts a couple days ago. It just seems like the opposition last night in particular, Colorado, is stacking the blue line, and it's not giving the Blackhawks much room for any entry. And usually when the PK presents that type of setup, the best thing to do is dump it in or chip it in slightly and go retrieve that puck and try to set up your power play. And I don't know if this is an area that they clearly need to work on.
Yeah, 2 things I've noticed. So they've had really difficult breakouts on the very first entry, where it's like, okay, you get the first entry, it's 𝗏𝗏 swinging behind their own goal. It's 𝗏𝗏 𝗟𝗏 and Connor Bedard waiting for the drop back, and they enter the zone, right? When that fails and the opponent clears it back the other way, it feels like Chicago is trying to start their breakout in the neutral zone because they don't want to waste more time having to backtrack, go all the way behind the goal line. But then the challenge is when you start the breakout in the neutral zone, you're not entering the zone with momentum. So everyone's kind of flat-footed. And even when you do dump the puck in, they're not going to go win that race because they're all starting from, a baseline. They're not going into the zone with momentum. And then it gets cleared the other way. And then you have to exert more energy trying a third breakout. And so it's certainly it's one of those things where it's kind of bizarre because they've had such great power play success this season, but it hasn't been, it's kind of come in like long waves, you know, like they've had like long waves of like, wow, power play is really clicking. And then there's like a stretch of like 6 games where you're like, man, the power play has really struggled. And so you look at the overall percentage and you're like, oh, Chicago has been really, really strong in the power play this season, but they have gone through a lot of ups and downs, and we're seeing the downs of it right now. Obviously, there are a lot of young players on particularly the quarterback situations have changed dramatically over the last month with no Seth Jones. Martinez isn't on the second unit anymore. It's Levshunov, it's Rinzel, Korchinski when he was in the lineup. So there are some moving parts, but those guys have been impressive on the power play. And so it's weird that they're out of sync when it comes to the breakouts.
One thing when we put a bow on this season and we look back at all the different units and the different lines and deep pairings, and we look at special teams and the power play in particular, you know, like the percentage has been really good all season long. But, you know, sometimes that is a bit deceiving. They haven't garnered a lot of power play opportunities. There's been plenty of nights. I think there's been 4 or 5 games this year where they haven't had a power play. And there's been countless games where they've only had 1 or 2. So when we say that they're, you know, at a 27% clip or whatever the final number is, we also have to take into consideration, you know, how many penalties are they drawing? And right. That's also a sign of how hard you are to play against as well.
Yeah, 100%. I remember years ago too, the Hawks had one of the worst statistical starts on the penalty kill, where it was like the first month of the season, they had given up like 15 power play goals on like 30 chances or something. It was horrendous. And then from like November and on, the Hawks PK percentage was like among these NHL's best. But because it was so poor in the first month of the season, every time, you know, opponents would come in, you would hear on the broadcast, oh, the Hawks, you know, PK is struggling this year. It's 20th in the league. And it's like, no, it's January. If you eliminated October, Hawks are actually in the top 5 in the penalty kill. And so that's what it kind of feels like in this situation, where you see the overall power play percentage and you're like, all right, that's a respectable percentage. But the way they've gotten there has been very streaky.
Well, so we talked about the Mikheyev shorthanded goal. That was a sweet play, by the way, where he fakes the backhand, and you can see the goalie is cheating that way and opens up his left side, right side for Mikheyev to deposit the puck. But I love the Connor Murphy goal in particular. Loved everything about it. Good along the boards, fighting to win a board battle. Bedard finishes the check on 𝗻𝗠cy as 𝗻𝗠cy rims it around. And then Del Mastro with a good pinch gets it back to Bedard behind the net. And Murphy sees some open ice, gets in good position, and puts it in the back of the net. Like, those are the types of plays that this team wants to replicate on a somewhat regular basis. And I thought that was, like, I liked a lot of what I saw about last night's game, taking into consideration the opponent they were going up against throughout the night.
Yeah, as Biz said on TNT, that was not pond hockey. That was a really good shift by the Blackhawks, and nice to see Connor in the middle of it. He sets up Murphy. What a rip by Connor Murphy. I mean, that was as clocked of a shot as we've seen him put all of his momentum into it. Low, exactly where you want it, above the right pad, but below the right blocker. And you could tell the celebration that it meant a lot to him to get that off of his chest, because he hasn't contributed much in that area this year than in years past. And I imagine Murphy has been looking around the Blackhawks locker room lately and is like, boy, I mean, I am the old guy in here, especially on the back end. And for him to contribute in that way, it was cool to see offensively.
I think he's been I think it's been underestimated what a great teammate he has been.
Yes.
and a great leader he has been. Because he, first of all, when you talk to him, you get very measured responses, and you get some real good insight into what he's going through, what the team is going through. he's the longest tenured Blackhawk, and you haven't heard him say once, like, when Stan Bowman brought me here, this isn't what I signed up for. Like that was a phrase we heard, and I'm not trying to dog Seth, but I mean that was something that he played that card. I'm not. That's not that. And I guess I could say Connor could have played the same card, so to speak. A little different situation. Didn't sign the 8-year mega deal, but he's bit his tongue. He is accepted every challenge that's been thrown his way, every D partner that's been thrown his way, every different coach that's been thrown his way, every different system that coach runs. And now it's like all that towing the line and accepting whatever they throw at him. He's now going to be entering the final year of his deal. And like you said, looks around the room and is like, okay, where do I fit in? Because I do think, like, you can't just hand the keys over to the kids next year and say, figure this thing out. Like, there's going to need to be veterans in place that are going to help usher this team get to a competitive level. And I think Murphy's one of those guys.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. If there's anyone in that Blackhawks locker room where you'd be like, I get it. I get why he would want to like go try a different scenario. It would be him. And he has never showed an ounce of that, whether publicly, behind closed doors. He has always been committed to maybe not the overall direction of the team, because the wind has blown in a lot of different directions since he's been on the Blackhawks roster, but he has always said the right things, has done the right things, plays the right way. And he's a guy that wears the letter on his sweater. And you're like, no, he really is actually the leader, both vocally and on the ice, in the way that he plays and the way that he carries himself. And I've always appreciated about that. It's hard to believe, Pat, that he was part of the Nicholas Hjalmarsson trade. I mean, that happened so long ago. I think Troy had mentioned on the broadcast that he's the longest tenured Chicago athlete right now. Like, that's wild to me. And so
that says something about, but he is. And that's crazy. That's crazy. That is really crazy to think. That does also, I think that's a good barometer of where Chicago sports are at right now. There's been so much turnover. There's been so many managerial and coaching changes. There have been a turnover left and right. And to think that Connor Murphy is the longest tenured Chicago athlete is pretty amazing. I don't know if you heard his comments last night. He kind of was asked, about his reaction to that and how he's been handling this. And in typical Connor fashion, he puts a realistic stamp on it. He said, this was an 8:52 start on a Wednesday night in Chicago, and we had a near full house. We have a lot of people cheering for us, and so I'm out there to put on a show for them. And I thought, like, that was we all kind of get we tend to focus on what's in our world, in our bubble, and how life affects us. And I just thought it was a real look at, a player who's appreciative of the lack of wins, the lack of success, the lack of playoff appearances. And he was just putting it strictly on, these people pay a lot of money. They're here on a work night, a school night, and, they're here till 11:30 at night cheering us on. I'm going to do the best for them. I thought that told you everything you needed to know about Connor Murphy.
For sure. And I think it's easy to go through the motions of, I've been here for 8 years, 9 years, however long it's been. We do this for a living. It's easy to get swept up in the monotony of the schedule. And then you kind of put it into perspective. And selfishly, like, even for my own sake, like during the national anthem, I feel like for me, that's a time to reflect and be like, somebody here tonight is experiencing Blackhawks hockey for the first time, like their first ever hockey game. And so it kind of grounds myself, but it was cool to hear Connor Murphy say that as well. Like, somebody here is experiencing this for the first time. Like we want to make sure that we're delivering for them, even though they haven't been able to in the wins and loss column. It's cool that he is recognizing the importance of what it means to be able to still play in front of this crowd, even though they have not been able to deliver in the standings. And so I again, he always hits a home run with what he says in the media. Connor Murphy does.
So despite, giving up the lead in that third period, a lot of learning moments in this one. We talked about the Bedard face-off against Brock Nelson already. How about Rinzel and Vlasic defending the MacKinnon line all night? I mean, that you talk about baptism by fire. Rinzel was preparing for UMass a week ago?
Yeah.
And now he's preparing for, the greatest duo currently in the National Hockey League in MacKinnon and Makar.
Yeah, it's got to be a crazy 180 from what position they were exactly a week ago today. Just like you said, preparing mentally for a potential long run at a Frozen Four. They get eliminated, and now you have Oliver Moore also taking a face-off against Nathan MacKinnon in 3-on-3 overtime, and it was Moore's guy to cover Nathan MacKinnon. And Moore is one of the few guys in the NHL that can probably skate with MacKinnon, because he did. I saw him skate up the ice and went toe-to-toe with him. Obviously not the same players, but the speed-wise, Moore was able to do so and to handle that. And the Vlasic and Rinzel pairing specifically, it's a lot of size on that on the pairing, but boy, both of those guys can skate. And I can't help but not get excited if you're a Chicago fan about the possibility of when these guys hit the prime of their career and the confidence they're solidified in the NHL and what their bodies will fill into and where their kind of base level will be. It's like, man, it could be a special pairing one day. And with Rinzel, like, it was interesting hearing him talk. It was yesterday morning. I think he told one of the reporters that one of the guys that he grew up watching was 𝗂𝗏.
Yeah.
And I was like, I see in the offensive zone specifically, I see Rinzel have those Makar type characteristics where he's like a total horse out there. He can dance. He has the confidence. Not saying he's going to be a 𝗂𝗏 type player, but I see the similarities between their games stylistically in the offensive zone. And so that is certainly a guy that if I was Rinzel, I would continue to watch and study. And it's interesting too, because he finished with almost 24 minutes of ice time. At any point, did you see Rinzel like have the stick on his knees and he was huffing and puffing? Like it seems like he can log these minutes so effortlessly, which is an admirable trait to have, because if he's a guy that needs to log, like 𝗂𝗏 logged 31 minutes last night, if Rinzel has to do that down the road, it feels like he can handle that. And boy, what a luxury that would be to have for Chicago.
Especially when you're coming from the Big Ten and maybe it's the lack of workload is helping him now, but they don't play a lot of games per week. They don't play 4 and 7.
Yeah, good point.
So, you factor that into the equation. We talk about other learning moments. Second period, they got hemmed in quite a bit. We've seen that throughout the season, no matter who's out there. But in particular with some new players, younger players, these are learning lessons of when you get the puck out too. Got to get it deep. You've got that long change. You've got to try and take advantage of every opportunity you can when the puck gets out of the D zone. And what did you see kind of collectively from the hemmed in portion of last night's game?
Yeah, it was certainly the definition of bend but don't break. And there were, even in the first period, there were moments where Colorado had their chances. Like, I think the high quality scoring chances were pretty high for Colorado and low for Chicago.
18-6 high danger chances in favor of the Avs.
That sounds about right. And so there was some element of Chicago did a good job of bending but not breaking, and eventually, obviously, they did break when Colorado broke through in the third period, and then winning the game in a shootout. But I think it's one of those things that, like, there were a lot of young players on that really extended shift. It was Levshunov and Rinzel were the defensemen that were caught. I think I tweeted out the shift lengths. Yeah, it was Levshunov was out there for 2 minutes and 36 seconds, Bedard 2:33, Donato 2 minutes, and then it was Rinzel 1:48 and Oliver Moore at 1:47. So, I mean, it was just Levshunov, Rinzel, and Moore weren't even on the roster 3 weeks ago, and they were out there against the McKinnon and Makar line. And so some of it is just they got out there against two of the best players in the world. And so it was just kind of the inexperience. And it was in the second period, so it was the long change, so they couldn't get back to the bench in time.
Oliver Moore, no shot attempts against the Avalanche. Rinzel had 6 shot attempts, 2 shots on goal. And another learning moment was the 3-on-3 overtime situation going up against that team. I thought they comported themselves very well in that scenario.
I thought so too. And we had Oliver Moore on in the, I think it was the first intermission of our segment, interviewing him. And he was like, he kind of had to like remove the starstruckness of seeing guys like McKinnon and Makar. And then, and then I was watching 3-on-3 overtime, and the Hawks had an offensive zone draw, and it was Moore versus McKinnon. McKinnon wins the faceoff pretty cleanly, and then it's Moore's job to literally hunt down Makar or McKinnon and just kind of just basically shadow him, and he did a great job. And so one of those, I know he didn't have a single shot attempt. I think he only took 2 shifts in the third period. That entire line did. It was after the goal around the 10-minute mark that we didn't see Slaggert, Reichel, and Moore for the rest of the period. But then I saw overtime start, and that was like, you got to put Moore on the ice, because this is where his speed element can take over. And so again, learning lessons. They did put Oliver Moore at the center position in this game. He played on the wing in the first. Only took 4 draws, and he lost all 4 of them. So it wasn't really a heavy workload in the faceoff department. I think what the Hawks were trying to accomplish there, and are trying to accomplish there, is he played center basically all year at Minnesota, but also because he has that type of speed, if he's starting his shifts as the low forward in the defensive zone, he has that speed to come through the neutral zone and potentially create some odd man rushes.
Kevin Korchinski was a healthy scratch. Del Mastro entered the lineup for him. Del Mastro had the assist on the Connor Murphy goal. We saw Kaiser on the doorstep. Maroon almost connect. Well, they did connect, but it was a great save that was made. Your thoughts on Korchinski being a healthy scratch?
I don't think it's a huge deal, but I do think it is something worth monitoring moving forward, because we're seeing Rinzel and Levshunov step right into NHL action, and they look very comfortable and they look at ease. You're seeing more and more of the Blackhawks young defensemen start to graduate to the NHL level or start to get tastes. And at some point, you do want to see progress, even though Korchinski is still very young. And I think this is why I've always been of the proponent that it's better to let the prospects over ripen in Rockford and not let kind of yo-yo them between the AHL and the NHL, and then you're kind of messing with their overall development. I don't think the Hawks did that in this case. I know in December, Korchinski had a call-up, played in 9 games. They sent him back down. So it was kind of like a taste, like where's a little barometer of where his game has come in the first half of the season. Then he gets called up. I thought it was interesting. Somebody had made a point that Korchinski's numbers in Rockford started to get significantly better statistically when Levshunov got called up to the Blackhawks. So it was like Korchinski's role elevated in Rockford. Then he played much better, maybe because he started to get those responsibilities. And so I don't know if it's kind of like a scenario where Korchinski sees Levshunov and Vlasic and Rinzel, and he maybe is subconsciously trying to compete with them to like stay at their level. But I think everyone is on their own development path. And so the Hawks will obviously continue to work with him. But it's hard not to think about last year and how challenging it must have been for him to kind of be on this tweener of maybe not ready for the NHL, but also graduated from the WHL, also deals with the sudden passing of his father that he had to deal with mentally. And so all of it encompasses things, but not a huge concern just yet, though.
Yeah, I think we also have to remember the development path that defensemen usually take. And, Duncan Keith spent time in the minors. Like, there are a lot of defensemen that, and we've seen it, that, players that we've given up on here in Chicago and have gone on to win Stanley Cups and be part of blue lines across the league. A lot of them mature more around 25, 26. And we're asking Kevin Korchinski at the age of 20, when his body is not even matured to the level of going up against men on any given night. And you talk about his numbers going up when 𝗏𝗏 was called up. That also works at the NHL level. We saw Vlasic's numbers go up when Seth Jones went on the shelf because of the broken foot, and then Korchinski's numbers, he played his best hockey over that span, given more responsibilities. And then when Seth came back, Vlasic tailed off a little bit. So, it can work at every level. The tough thing is the challenge, I think that is when do you make the decision? When do you decide that that this player A is not a part of our championship future, when you can't, when the sample size isn't a realistic amount? And what muddies the waters more is when certain players go on unexpected development plans. Like I think we'd all say, we all thought Sam Rinzel would take a longer time to develop, but nobody saw the jump that we've seen in the last little over a year in Minnesota. So, that's a feather in Sam Rinzel's cap. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a detriment to Kevin Korchinski's path. But when you're deciding these factors of who gets playing time and big picture where everybody slots, you have to factor in those things.
Right. There's only so many spots to go around, and mathematically, not every one of these picks that the Blackhawks have made are going to be part of the long-term picture. Like at some point, some of these players are developing very nicely and they're becoming appealing trade chips as well. I think it's maybe a little bit early to be thinking which guys exactly could be, because I think the Hawks are still in the evaluation process of all that. And, you mentioned that, Duncan Keith, he spent 2 years, I think it was a year in college, or a year and a half in college. Then he went to the WHL and then spent 2 full seasons in the minor leagues without even sniffing the NHL. So the only thing I would caution is you don't want the impatience to drive the decisions of call-ups. And I'm not saying the Blackhawks are doing this, but I will say they did in a scenario in the previous regime when Adam Boqvist, when he got drafted by Chicago. I remember we were there in Dallas. He was like, I think I'm at least 2 to 3 years away from the NHL. And then he goes back to the OHL for a year. Then he makes the jump over to professional hockey. He's in the minors, and it was like a month into the season, and the Hawks season had gone so poorly to that point that the Hawks upper management said we need to call up Boqvist to give the fans something to cheer about. And even Boqvist got called up. He's like, I was a little surprised I wasn't playing that well in Rockford. I was like, oh. And so you don't want those things to drive the call up decisions. Like, hey, season's been tough. Hawks are second to last in the standings. Let's call up this guy so we can give our fans something to cheer about. Like, you don't want that to be the primary driving force behind these decisions. And so that's what we should caution the Blackhawks specifically. And so we'll see how it all plays out, because they do have a lot of players that started the year on Rockford on the Blackhawks right now. And so you don't want to like yo-yo them back and forth, but it's certainly interesting dynamic, especially as some of these guys start to sign their ELCs again, like the Ryan Greens and Nick Lardis. And when they make the jump to professional hockey, it's very excited to get excited about Nick Lardis and wow, he's unbelievable. But it's like, you don't want to be like, oh, let's throw him into the NHL right away, because every player is on their own development path.
The entire sports world will be watching the Chicago Blackhawks on Friday night because they're taking on Alex Ovechkin and the Washington Capitals. Ovechkin scores in Carolina on Wednesday. He is now 3 away from breaking Wayne Gretzky's record. He's at 892. So the Blackhawks will face off in the nation's capital. He's 3 away. You say hat tricks. Alex has had 32 hat tricks in his career. One of those was at the United Center when he got his 800th career goal. So he does have a little history in that department, but it's a tall task for any player to think that they can go out there and get a hattie. What do you think the chances are of us seeing history made Friday night between the Capitals and the Blackhawks?
Yeah, I most certainly won't rule anything out. I think on some level it would be cool to experience, but it would also be kind of mortifying if you were part of the team and you were like, we're going to be on these highlight reels forever. So I don't think anyone wants to be a part of it. It has been cool to watch the journey of when he's scoring goals on the road. Like the road fans are cheering the goals too. Like that's how appreciative they are of watching this chase and to actually be a part of it too. Like the Carolina game, maybe it was easier on Wednesday night in the first TNT doubleheader. Maybe it was easier for Carolina to cheer that goal because they were already winning 4-0 in that game. So the game was kind of almost over. But it's been cool to see the fans rally behind, like we're all invested into this chase. And so we'll see how it plays out on Friday night, but it's been a joy to watch. My only thing is I just want him to get it done this year. Like it feels like it's a slam dunk, but that it would be really difficult if he went on like a 5-game goal drought and then he's sitting on like 1 goal and we got to go all summer and this is I hope it doesn't kill the vibes, but I feel like he's going to get it done this year.
And Gretzky will be in the house, so a lot of reasons to listen to WGN Radio on Friday evening and CHSN. Pregame starts at 5:30. Puck drop just after 6 o'clock Central Time. Blackhawks taking on Alex Ovechkin and the Washington Capitals. That's going to do it for this edition of the Breakaway Podcast for CHSN, brought to you by Toyota. For Charlie Roumeliotis, I'm Pat Boyle. Thank you for watching and listening. We will catch you next time.